In Full Zoom is presented by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. and IT&E.
All right, half a day, everyone, and welcome to another edition of In Full Zoom. My name is Nestor Licanto, and our guests today are members of the Filipino Young Professionals Association. And first of all, let me introduce Eileen Igcasenza. I'll get that right by the end of the show, Eileen, don't worry. and she's going to introduce our other featured guest. Please go ahead, Eileen.
All right, thank you very much, Nestor. Hafade Guam. My name is Eileen Agahan Igcasenza, and I am the Guam delegate to the Filipino Young Leaders Program in 2019. So this is a very prestigious program. There's actually only been 4 of us from Guam who has represented, on the Filipro stage. I, along with Rebecca Elmore back in 2017, we have Dondi Quintans in 2016. And former Senator Dennis Rodriguez in 2013. So we have proudly represented our island in this program. And today I am pleased to welcome my fellow batchmate. We both participated in the immersion program back in the Philippines in 2019. We are the very last batch to have the honor of this experience prior to the pandemic. And she is visiting all the way from Carson, California, and including Guam and her series of road shows to promote FilPro. So she will tell us more about her visit and the projects that FilPro has executed lately. Please welcome Leezel Tanglao.
Thank you, Eileen. Half a day, mabuhay, good day to everyone here. So happy to be here in Guam. And making the rounds across the U.S. And really trying to reconnect with everyone. I mean, it's been 2 years since the pandemic, so this is something that we've been missing. The gathering and having these spaces. But yeah, my name again is Leezel Tanglao, and by trade, I have been a journalist the last 20 years. I've worked at some of the biggest news orgs, both from the local end in Southern California, as well as national in New York City. So every place from like ABC News to CBS to places like Vice News, Now This, HuffPost, Associated Press, and currently I'm, you can say, at a dream job. I essentially get paid to travel. I'm at the Point Sky, which pretty much allows me to take these trips and help others take really, fantastic journeys through their points and miles. So that's what I do in my day job. And then I am the current 2022 president of FilPro, Filipino Young Leaders Program. So I'm super excited to chat about that and talk about some of our upcoming initiatives and the program itself.
Okay, before we get to that, Leezel, because I am also in the journalism business, you piqued my interest. So tell me a little bit more about your background, how you got into it, why you got into it, and some of the experiences you had as an Asian American reporter.
Yeah, so it's the running joke, I think, among journalists. So why did you get into journalism is because, you know what, I suck at math. So I'm not the best math person. I'm not the best math person. So that kind of canceled out all the sciences and everything, all that. But I knew that I can write and I enjoy writing. So it's like, what profession is going to allow me to do that for a living? And that's kind of how I fell into journalism. And I started out my career in print at the Press Enterprise out in Riverside County, California, which is about 2 hours east of Los Angeles, and really got a lot of my reporting chops there, covering city council meetings. When the recession hit around 2008, I was like, I got to get out of newspapers. So I jumped to digital and worked at the local CBS station out in California. And literally that was the job that got me to New York. And I spent about 10 years there working at, places like CBS, ABC, startups like Now This, Vice, and then spent a good portion of my career in New York at CNN. And then eventually made my way to the Associated Press, HuffPost, and then now at the Point Sky, which travel, travel is such in the DNA as Filipinos. If you look really way back, as our ancestors were voyagers and whatnot, and just travel, not only in the physical sense, but also kind of the spiritual sense, that the journey that we're all on And certainly travel is kind of core to as well in PhilPro as well with our immersion program. So yeah, that's kind of a high level view of kind of like my journey so far, at least in journalism, and hopefully being able to amplify a lot of our stories, because there's definitely not enough of us out there, and trying to get into key decision-making places so that a lot of our stories get greenlit. So we're trying to get more of our stuff out.
I was going to ask you if you experienced a lot of Asian counterparts while you were working, because I know I used to be a member of the AAJA, the Asian American Journalists Association, and then that's the main purpose is to have more Asians represented in the business, right?
Yeah, I mean, even till now, right? I think we are still struggling to get in those higher rankings, like getting into those key decision-making places where, you can actually set the agenda. I mean, I try to keep track of all the other PhilAms out there. There's not very many of us, and oftentimes I'm the only one or one of the few. I am also a member of AJ, and I've been working with them on their 40th anniversary initiatives, because that organization just celebrated 40 years, as well as the the convention that's coming up this year. So the struggle is still real, the challenge is still real, but I think we keep fighting the fight, because it's like if we don't, who's going to tell our stories? It's just as important. We can't wait for anyone else. We have to reclaim and control that, control our story. So
In Full Zoom is presented by Calvo Enterprises Inc. and IT&E. GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information. In Full Zoom is presented by Calvo Enterprises Inc. and IT&E.
All right, but we're here to talk about the FYL Pro. So let me ask Eileen, what interested you in joining this organization?
Well, of course, being Filipino and wanting to learn more about my heritage, I think it was a natural fit, to seek this program. And with the support of the Philippine Consulate here in Guam, I was given that opportunity to apply to the program. And boy, it was definitely life-changing. I think that's the best word to describe the experience, to be able to return to the motherland and to expose myself to really a deep historical and cultural experience. We had the opportunity to meet with business and government leaders, and we also participated in a community service project. So this was a week-long program in the Philippines, and it was definitely packed with activity almost every day. Leezel, we definitely walked away, having such memorable experiences and a deep friendship that extends until now with all our fellow batchmates.
Can you point to one or two things that you really was your big main takeaway from that experience?
I think just opening our eyes, how can we further advance the Philippines and the Filipino people? Now we're able to come back to our homes and be able to share this experience and continue through our legacy projects. And so in many ways, we come up with different initiatives. How can we contribute to the socioeconomic progress of the country? And we just had our roadshow yesterday. So that's why Leezel is here. We met with representatives of our local community. We had good representation from business, government, healthcare, nonprofit. And our goal is to really grow our membership here and to be able to have fellow young leaders participate in our initiatives. So this is only the beginning of many things to come.
All right, Leezel, can you expand on the roadshow, its purpose, and just some of the things that you've experienced on this trek you've been making?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, when I took over as president in January, it was really important to really try to foster these spaces that obviously have been missing in the last 2 years during the pandemic. So obviously we've been on Zoom, we've been on virtual, which has been great because that has also opened up a lot of opportunities to interact with people you probably normally wouldn't. But, as we're kind of hopefully turning the corner of the pandemic, it just made, I think, everyone realize how we took for granted a lot of the in-person, that high touch interaction. So, And me being in a very unique position at the place that I work, that's been very supportive, like it was a great alignment of both like professional as well as like personal community like work in terms of like how these two things intersecting. And in many ways, I feel like that's such the Filipino American, Filipino diasporic experiences where, you know, we often sometimes get siloed into our own little lane, but where the magic happens is when these things intersect and align. So for me, it's like the roadshow was is another way to get people kind of like re-engaged with them. You know, you know, it's, you know, obviously it's super easy to do email and whatnot, but to be able to gather people obviously safely, and if people are comfortable, it means a lot, you know, and I'm in such a very unique position that will allow me to do that. Not only, you know, obviously tell stories of the place that I'm going to for work, but also connect with the community there as part of my role in PhilPro. So it was important for me to make sure that we reach out and continue to re-engage with our alumni, but also reach out to the larger community, because ultimately PhilPro, yes, you know, it started out as an immersion program, but PhilPro really, the heart of it is us. It's Tayo, it's the people. And that is like the biggest takeaway that I walked away with in doing the program in 2019. Yes, it was definitely life-changing, but it was so transformative. Not just, you know, by nature of just like actually being in the motherland, breathing that same air that our ancestors breathed, just like walking around. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it was really the people I was with. I mean, if we did not have the same group of people, I don't know if it would have had that same level of transformative power. You know, it was the first time I really felt like I was being seen and heard, no judgment, very supportive. And it's just, to me, like, we have to replicate that. We have to have like some type of multiplier effect to also gift that gift, you know, to other people. Because I think that just only helps us all in the end as a community. Like, what a gift it was to be kind of put on that path with all these other really young professionals that are all also on a similar journey, but I don't know if I would have run into them in the same way. You know, we had a wide spectrum, especially in Eileen and I's batch, from someone as young as 25 to someone as old as 40, which is the age range. And again, like, you know, me being a journalist, sure, I talked to a lot of people in all walks of life, but I don't know if I would have like really kind of run into these people any other way. And they've just been like these, I think we're so bonded now in that shared experience, even 2 years later. Not only within our own cohort, but like the larger alumni community that I've been having the opportunity to work with very closely on like bigger projects. And to me, it has been a confirmation of like, we don't necessarily need to be physically in the same place to have impact. And I think things like, for example, our Tayo help desk was a great example of that. We stood up this virtual help desk to help our kababayans during COVID-19, because we saw all our lolos and lolos and titas were, you know, sharing misinformation. Oh my God, what do we do? Or like, how do we have these like difficult conversations with our older relatives without being disrespectful because they're not listening to CDC guidance? So that really was a call to action to us. Like, how do we respond? Like, we are all young professionals, like there needs to be something we can do. So that really came out of literally a Zoom call. And, you know, 2 years later, you know, we got funding up to several grants, up to almost 120,000 in funding this project. And we are still meeting every Sunday, almost every Sunday in the last 2 years to continue this project, because we believe in it in the most. And it wasn't until I would say December that I had not met a lot of these folks that are involved in that project. But, you know, again, power of like video calls and whatnot. And just like, I think being united under one mission, regardless of your discipline, like it's beautiful to see. So like, how do we kind of take that template and apply it to a larger thing?
In Full Zoom is presented by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. and IT&E. GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information. In Full Zoom is presented by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. and IT&E.
Yeah, Eileen, what do you see as the role that overseas Filipinos can play in assisting the Philippines? I think there's two things that stick out to a lot of people that visit the Philippines for the first time, and one is poverty. Number one, if you go to Metro Manila in particular, because and that's something that the tag that has kind of stuck with the Philippines, because there is such a disparity between the rich and the poor, and then the middle class, although it has been growing in the last couple of decades, is still relatively small compared to a developed country. So what are your thoughts when you went back there?
Oh gosh, I mean, definitely we're looking at ways on how we can improve the situation back home. And yes, you are right. Poverty is still very prevalent until today. And really, with us living overseas, I think there is that importance of extending whatever we can back home. I still have family back home, and I think we still maintain that close relationship where we are working hard here overseas, and as my family, we do send help back home, and in the form of whether it be monetary or in kind. And really our goal is to help them improve their livelihood. As they say, leave them with the tools and helping them improve their livelihood. And really that's what we're trying to do, I think, as a society, right? Again, the whole bayanihan spirit, whatever help we can extend. That's why we work so hard, right? Overseas, and we're known, to make sacrifices in order to support families back home. So I think ultimately, I think as PhilPro, we can find ways to address poverty in our own ways. The initiatives we do come up with are legacy projects. So small steps for sure can lead to good results.
How about you, Leezel?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much, right? And I think it's really kind of, digging deep into core values, right? I think, and I had said this in other interviews too, like, when I think of Filipinos, it's like innovation comes to mind immediately for me, right? So like, you can't tell me as a people, like, we're not innovators in our own right. Of all the crises that we've had to go through in like centuries of colonialism and wars and things like that. So it's like, how do we tap that to try to like solve for a lot of like these issues like poverty and like other things that are happening overseas? Because what happens overseas in the Philippines also affects us. And I think the pandemic is a great example of that. Like, we can't ignore the folks, like, yes, we're in our bubble in the US, but like, it's just as important that we keep tabs of what's happening there. Yeah, they may be an ocean away, but eventually it all affects us because we all have family, we all have friends, we all have a peer group that, we are deeply connected to. So like, how do we continue to figure out and innovate in creative ways beyond the usual norm to move us forward as the people?
What have you found to be in general, the perception of overseas Filipinos? And I'm talking because there's two types. There's overseas Filipino workers, the OFWs, who go and for a short period of time, make money overseas, which they send home to the family, which happens to be one of the highest, one of the biggest parts of the Philippine national budget. And then Filipinos who are maybe have lived elsewhere, like in the United States for several generations already. Those are the folks I'm talking about. What do you think is the general perception of Filipinos who have grown up in overseas and maybe are not as familiar with the Philippines because they haven't been back?
I think it's a good question because like, and I would take it from a longer lens, which for a lot of the experience that you pointed to is felt by Filipino Americans. Oftentimes, as people, we occupy a lot of spaces at the same time. And certainly as children of immigrants that came to the US or wherever they end up settling, I think there's an innate curiosity of like identity and minority, but being a minority in a country, right, where you have to fight for your voice and your spaces. So I think overall, like, I think it's just that search for a greater identity, the search for self that occurs in a lot of our journeys. And it happens for people in different parts of their lives. And that's why I think something like PhilPro, like, came at the right time, at least for me personally, going through just my own personal journey and reconnecting with my culture. And it came for me, at least, at a time where, like, there was a lot that was happening in my professional career. And for a while, I was like, well, what do I do next? You know? And I always go back to culture. Like, whenever I feel lost, I go back to my core and, like, Filipino, like, really deep, you know, kind of roots. And that always has been the North Star. So I'd like to think that for a lot of folks that grew up elsewhere, that, like what you had mentioned, like overseas, to try to satisfy, like, what does that mean to be Filipino? And at the end of the day, it's really kind of struggling and kind of reconciling that. And I really believe it's like, you can only define that. You should not let anyone else define what that is, because it's such a personal journey. But it's a journey that we all share, that I think sometimes we forget that, you know what, we're not alone. Like, everyone's kind of trying to figure this out. And it's really kind of maybe going back to that Kapwa spirit that we see throughout wherever you are in the diaspora. And it's okay. Like, you know, we don't know exactly where it is. It's the process. It's not the destination. It's really going to the journey that I think is the most worthwhile thing.
And Eileen, how about Filipinos that grew up on Guam? It's a little bit different, I think, because we're so close to the Philippines. There's a large Filipino population on Guam that is well integrated with the local population, particularly over the last 2 or 3 decades, that it's almost, almost one. So I think the Filipinos who were born and raised in Guam are well integrated with the Guamanians, right? And so and many may not have been back to the Philippines, the home of their parents or grandparents, whatever the case may be. What do you think their thoughts are? What do you think their perception is?
Right. Well, like you mentioned, Nestor, I mean, it's a great advantage that we are within close proximity to the Philippines. So it's just a short flight away to get there. And being, again, that the Filipinos are the second largest population in Guam, it really feels like home. You know, I go back more often than Leezel, I'm sure, because we do have a short flight away, you know, to the Philippines. And again, living in a Filipino household too, that keeps my values alive, really. So I'm able to maintain my strong ties to the Philippines, just being surrounded by our fellow kababayans here in Guam. And like you said, Guamanian, we integrate our cultures very well. We share a common history. Of course, with the Spanish colonial times, right? And it's very much seen, and, the influence of that in our food, right? And our belief systems and values and culture in general. So again, the shared heritage, I think, is what really connects us all.
In Full Zoom is presented by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. and IT&E. GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information. In Full Zoom is presented by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. and IT&E.
Yeah. And Leezel, there's also a lot of Filipinos in California, in Southern California in particular, well, actually both, Northern California too, in San Francisco Bay Area. Is there a difference from what their perception as to what Eileen just explained?
Oh, sorry.
That's you. Sorry. Do you want me to repeat the question? I was asking if, from the California Filipino perspective, because there's quite a number of Filipinos, both in Northern and Southern California. From what you just heard, Eileen explain the Guam Filipino perception. Is it any different?
There's some similarities, I think. We are farther away. So I think there's a different definition of home. You know, at least in the LA area, there's at least 500,000 Filipinos that are there. So that's quite a few. But we're all like spread out. And, you know, growing up in communities like Carson, where there is a significant Filipino population, it does kind of feel like home. I see people that look like me. And, you know, you kind of take that for granted, especially when you talk to other of our peer groups that live in the Midwest or sometimes even in the East Coast, where they don't always see that. So they are truly like the minority in the minority. So I think in California, I would say we were blessed to be around a lot more folks, like a lot of Filipinos, where we can easily go to a Jollibee or a seafood city and we will run into somebody there, even in a big metropolitan city like Los Angeles. So in many ways, yeah, it feels like home in a different sense. Whereas, I mean, you know, I've been in Guam the last couple of days. This really feels like an offshoot of the Philippines too. It's like really kind of just the warmth, and people here just really feels like that, versus in LA where there's some of that, but there's just more people and people are more spread out and people kind of have their own little enclaves, versus here it's like, wow, it's like everyone's so connected. Like, you know, you can't go a couple of feet without seeing someone knows, you know, which is great. It's having that kind of close intimacy that I think you don't get to see at bigger metropolitan areas like Southern California or the Bay Area.
Yeah, I don't know how much you guys have been following the Filipino elections, but in May, the Philippines will be electing a new president, and what I would consider probably one of the most consequential elections coming out of the pandemic. The Philippines, prior to the pandemic, was doing actually pretty good. It was moving up the economic ladder. Things seemed to be going well for the economy, and then, like the rest of the world, you know, COVID happened, and so it hurt. The economy is suffering, you know, and so the next president of the Philippines, who will be elected in May, that person's main job is going to be to lift this country back out of its, you know, doldrums, and you know. So, what are your thoughts on that? Just so let me start with you, Eileen. How important do you think that's going to be?
Right. You know, Nestor, we actually had a really good conversation with Consul General Patrick John Hilado earlier this week. And the topic was how do we reemerge from the pandemic? And this is going to be the theme this year. You know, exploring ways, you know, how can we reopen, you know, the country. And again, you know, we know that tourism has been greatly affected as well. I think that goes for us, our market, and across Asia, right? And also rebuilding our economy. So yeah, I mean, it's going to take, you know, gradual steps to get there, but I think we're moving in a positive direction, and this is going to be a very interesting election for sure to continue the work of the current administration.
Yeah. Leezel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail. This is going to be one of those very crucial pivots and turning points for the Philippines. And I really hope people, you know, exercise their right to vote, especially the folks that are overseas that can vote, because I think every vote's going to count. So hopefully, you know, people take up and use that privilege and right to do that, because it matters. I think we've seen just even globally with different other major elections, like, you know, every vote counts. So hopefully people do exercise their right to do that.
All right, Jason Salas, our producer, is cracking the whip on me and saying that we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to just pitch the PhilPro. And let me start with you, Eileen.
All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity to promote our organization. You know, we're very excited to really grow our community here in Guam. Again, with Leezel's Roadshow to kind of kick off this membership campaign. Please visit philpro.org for more information and how to become a member.
All right. And Leezel, do you have the final word?
Sure. Well, if you are looking to get involved with the Filipino community and the larger diaspora community, PhilPro is a great place to start. you will not regret being connected to a large network of high-performing Filipino Americans in all different industries. And really, it's been a privilege and honor to be part of this organization and lead it to the next level in terms of like, how do we, continue to facilitate these spaces for these really important interactions to happen. I think that's where the magic happens. And this is where, we can help de-risk a lot of things, promote people to take more risks, and hopefully that moves us forward as a people, not only in my generation, but the people right behind us, as well as, re-engaging with the folks who are ahead of us, because like everyone brings a certain value to the table. And I think we need to, leverage that.
All right, Leezel, Tanglao, Eileen, Agahan, Igcasenza. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Nestor.
All right, I'm Nestor Licanto. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you again next week on In Full Zoom.
In Full Zoom is presented by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. and IT&E.